Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Get Geek podcast, where we celebrate geek, nerd, and pop culture. Each week, we deliver the best analysis for fans, by fans, on anything related to movies, TV, video games, comics, anime, and manga. We talk geek. And now, here's the Get Geek podcast.
Hello, Internet. Welcome to another episode of the Get Geek podcast. Welcome. We are here this week to discuss a couple of very, very important topics and a couple of. It's so important that I said a couple of times in a couple of major universes. But first, a couple of disclaimers as usual. You've been hearing it ad nauseum for the past couple of weeks, but we just want to remind you we are recording remotely. So if there are any sound issues, artifacts, or other problems with the audio, let us know. We'll do the best that we can to try to iron them out. We hope that we've been improving over the last couple of months. And thank you for bearing with us regarding that as well. The best way to support your favorite podcast crew is to like, rate, share, and subscribe to the podcast. I'm tripping over myself a little bit today, guys. I'm sorry about that.
Hello.
Like, rate, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You know where to find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, iTunes, and now Amazon. Music, I believe. We're all over the place. Wherever your favorite podcast platforms are sold, you can find us. So anyways, what's up, everybody? My name, of course, is Jose.
This is Gabe, aka Wolfie, or whatever other nicknames the rest of the team wants to give me.
Yeah, Jits.
I'm going to give that pregnant pause like Wolfie, Gabe did. Hold on. And this is Walt.
Yes.
There you
What's
go.
going on, guys?
Chilling.
Not that much.
All right.
Chilling.
So pregnant pauses aside, what are we on this week, guys? We got some big news. A lot of big news, actually. A lot of big stuff going on.
Yeah, so this week we got like a couple big things. We got the Wandavision trailer that came out, which is kind of big, especially considering that this is like the thing that's going to move the MCU into the its next phase. And then we have the big, huge blockbuster news that came out that Microsoft has bought Bethesda out, which is so insanely huge. It's like monumental ramifications for the entire game industry, for the next generations to come. It's a complete game changer. So, but first we're going to talk about WandaVision. I kind of want to go for. I want to get your thoughts, guys. I mean, I saw the trailer. I enjoyed the trailer, but it's one of those trailers that's kind of hard to read. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. So for moi, I was pretty excited for this series on Disney Plus for a little bit. I don't want to say I was ecstatic and mind blown. That's what I was doing a moment ago when you were talking about Bethesda as well. That like GIF / meme where that dude like with the glasses blows his mind, mind blown. But like, so I was really excited to see this because I was just excited to see some more stuff in the MCU. Like we all are. We're all itching to see WandaVision and Falcon and the Winter Soldier and Loki and all these awesome shows with these awesome actors and characters that we've known and loved for the last 10 or so years. So when I saw the trailer, though, I'm actually way more excited. Okay, because there's a couple of things, and we'll get to that in a minute, after we give our first thoughts on this. But there's a couple of things that make me excited about where this show, it seems like they're even leaning maybe even a little bit more into this show being a relaunch / redirection of the MCU, as in the multiverse and all these other awesome things. I think pre-COVID, they were going to use this show for that. Maybe that's more of a focus now because everything's been shuffled around and now timelines are different and shows are going to come out before other shows when they were supposed to come out after, and movies and all of that. But yeah, it looks really, really interesting. It looks better than I even was interested in. I like the aesthetic. I like the kind of dark humor thing that's going on. I love the fact that Deborah Jo Rupp from That 70s Show is in this because she's hilarious.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. I mean, I got like, I don't know. There's obviously the 70s show stuff that, I feel like but I got like a Pleasantville vibe,
Yes,
So yeah.
100%. I got all these different eras of sitcoms, the vibe of all of those, which I thought was really, really cool and really interesting. And I think I'll let somebody else give their impressions, of course, obviously, and I'll shut up. But I think that what's interesting about this show is, how do I put this? I think the most interesting thing about it is the dark humor aspects of it, and like the way that it seems that they're going to use this as a vehicle, like I said. So anyways, those are my first impressions for this one here. What about you guys?
What about you?
Well, I found it interesting
As the ranking senior of the group, I feel like this kind of speaks to your childhood experiences watching TV.
Yeah, right. You know what I'm saying? I'm not
just
that
just so you guys know, we're all pretty much close in age. So
From the Bewitched days.
Busting chops.
Vin Diesel just turned
I'm
53.
thinking,
So I saw
oh my
Bewitched.
God, did he?
Yes, he did.
Wait,
He's
Vin
53 years old.
Diesel's 53?
So, see, I am not that old because I am way older, way younger than him. Well,
Yes.
not way younger.
As young enough.
Oh my God, he's
late
53.
40s.
Holy
Yes, he
crap,
is. He looks good for 53, man.
Yeah.
That's what being bald does for you.
He's looked the same way for like 15 years, so it kind of works in his favor.
We just finished watching Pitch Black, just as a side, and yeah, he's a little bit bigger, a little bit heavier now, but he looks basically the same. So
yeah, which is fine.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah. Anyway, WandaVision.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Well, speaking about the eras, they hit the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, even the 90s and stuff.
Bewitched.
There's
Full
a little
House.
Bewitched. I Love Lucy. You get the Brady Bunch. You get stuff like Family Ties and the Cosby Show. You get those TGIF type sitcoms that were big in the 90s and stuff like that. So you're getting a wide swath, I guess, if you want to say, in terms of what they're doing.
I mean, it reminded me of Leave It to Beaver. It just gave me all those all those things, especially
which is interesting
though. Just like
I wonder if each of those eras are going to be encompassed in like one episode. Maybe they give you like the first episode is 1950. I don't know how that works.
That's what I'm wondering too. I've seen that question. I want to say that it's kind of funny and kind of interesting that they're going to do kind of like a TGIF Full House aesthetic, and I wonder if they're going to have some Easter eggs or like little in jokes, considering that Elizabeth Olsen's sisters, Mary Kate and Ashley, are famous for being
to do that.
On that,
they have to do that. If they don't, they're missing something.
It would be awesome if there was an alternate universe, Wanda Maximoff, and it was one of the Olsen twins.
Wouldn't it be crazy if they de-aged them to way back when they were in Full House?
You got it, dude. That would be
awesome.
They would be in big trouble, mister.
Yeah, I know. And I also find it interesting that WandaVision kind of leapfrogged, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, because Falcon and the Winter Soldier was supposed to come out first.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if it's because of COVID-19. I'm pretty sure that's what it is. But, this trailer the trailer is really good. I don't know what the show is. You know what I'm saying? And I guess that's a good thing, right? Because you don't want to go into a show and know exactly what it is, because there's no excitement. There's no there's a little ambiguity, like what is going on with all these eras? You know what I'm saying? Is this WandaVision? And she's famous for that. WandaVision. Is this the Scarlet Witch manipulating reality? Is you get that question, or is it somebody doing that to her? You wonder, right? So but like I said, it's super intriguing, and obviously we're not the only ones, because this was the most watched streaming service trailer like ever.
For like
You
a
know,
TV show.
yeah, absolutely. I
Oh
mean,
wow,
this
I didn't.
thing, it broke records. It had 53 million views in 24 hours. There has
I mean that.
been no TV show or any show on a streaming service that has ever had that. So, and you wonder if it's because everybody's super excited about the show or because we haven't had an MCU anything for
Mhm.
2020,
That's what I was gonna
you
say. I
know?
was gonna say that like what it is that like this is, people kind of they've ever since the end of the Thanos era, whatever you want to call it,
Endgame.
Like
the
the
Infinity
Infinity
Gauntlet,
Saga, right?
Yeah, the Infinity
the
Saga.
Infinity Saga. Sorry, I had a little bit of a
Hmm.
brain fart there, but like
I've been
the
doing
end
it
of the
all day.
Infinity
No
Saga,
worries.
I think that there's been enough time in between to kind of let people just like settle, forget about MCU, and I think COVID actually kind of helped that a little bit, because it's
Yeah,
kind of forced us to take a little bit of a longer break, from these
but
franchises. And
I
now
want to
it's
see
like, all right,
something
now I'm
though.
craving, now I'm hungry.
Yeah,
I fasted for long enough, and now we got this first trailer that has come out from the MCU that is very different. It's very like there's a lot of little things to decipher from it. So, but yeah, Jose.
is oh,
Yeah, there's
oh
like so there's real quick. There's like a combination of factors in my opinion, and one that's most interesting to me actually is the fact that people are excited about the DCEU again. Because when you get hyped about that, and then like you want to see how the MCU is going to respond, I think also, and of course, yeah, like we all said, it's definitely because people have just not seen anything since what Spider-Man: Far From Home, I think, was the last MCU movie that we got in a theatrical release, right?
yep,
Um, other than basically what New Mutants, which I guess is technically in the
it's not
universe, but
MCU.
obviously not, right?
It's not
And then,
MCU.
of course, yeah, it's not MCU, but it's a Marvel release, whatever. But I think that, yeah, it's a combination of all those things that has people really, really excited about this trailer. And like you said, and like I mentioned also, it's the fact that Black Widow got pushed back. Falcon and the Winter
Next
Soldier
year.
got pushed back. Things are totally shifting in terms of where they're going to fit in the MCU timeline. So
Yeah, I think
that's
personally,
got people
yeah,
curious.
personally,
Hmm.
I think that it's weird, right? Obviously, with the pandemic and COVID and the whole nine, nobody wanted this to happen. But the silver lining is that it actually did kind of give us a chance to, or not just a chance, but but the entire industry a chance to kind of like sit back, reassess, take a breather, right? Because I think, especially with the MCU, the decision to have all these shows coming out there in this time was kind of made, I don't want to say rushed, but it was a business decision to like, all right, we gotta keep pumping stuff out, we gotta keep making money.
Yep.
Since the industry has been forced to take a pause, it's given them a chance to like, all right, let's sit and think about exactly how we're gonna release this. I think doing WandaVision, being that it's a more cryptic style of a show,
Hmm.
is the best way to start. It's like an appetizer. It's like, we're gonna give you a bunch of these little clips that are gonna be Easter eggs for the other shows that are gonna come in after that. I think that like if we have seen Black Widow come out and Winter Soldier and Falcon come out before this, those just would have been action shows, that like
Hmm.
obviously lend substance to the MCU,
Hmm.
but it would have just fulfilled that action kind of part of everything, right? Like if you start with
Exactly. I
WandaVision,
agree.
it gives
Hmm.
us all the Easter eggs that kind of like create like all the little strings that we're going to be looking for in the other shows. Right. When we
Right.
see Black Widow, we're going to be looking for the thing that ties into what we saw in WandaVision and so on and so forth. Um, but yeah, I think I'm excited. So, it
Yeah.
what if anything did you guys pick up specifically from the trailer? So for me, I also didn't necessarily know what I was looking at, but
Hmm.
my prediction is that it's going to start off a little bit like foggy, so to speak. Like the first few episodes are going to be just the same way that the characters were um, shown, where they didn't even know what was going on and stuff. And then little by little, it's going to start like the story is going to reemerge and it's going to, tell us, what direction they're going to be taking it towards. I mean, I felt like there was a, uh, of course, like I said, the old 70s TV show sitcom kind
Hmm.
of thing feel going for it, but I also feel like there's a Truman Show feel to it. You know what I mean? Just where like you don't
Yeah,
like they're gonna realize that there's someone else manipulating the strings, and they have to figure out how to escape this manipulation. That's where I think that the story is gonna go. Um,
I agree.
Jose, I see your hand raised again.
My hand is raised. I have to agree with your point also. That's very well made. Just before you ask this question, this is something new and different, and that's an awesome appetizer for fans that want to see what new directions the MCU is going to take, other than just beat 'em ups, which we love. But this is totally a different way to re-enter the universe. But the other things that are like really really interesting to me. Well, a lot of things that you just mentioned also, obviously hopping eras is really cool. Have a feeling like this is going to be, I think, what, a 6 or 8 episode series. So it's not going to be an exceedingly long amount of time to flesh out this story. So I feel like maybe the first episode or two, they're going to have, like you said, Gabe, that it's going to be, they're going to not understand exactly where they are, where Wanda is and where Vision are. They're just going to be living these like sitcom lives and not understand what's going on. I get a sense that creeping into the first episode, and sometime in the second episode is when they're going to start to discover that this is not, or whatever it is. It could be a pocket reality. It could be Wanda manipulating reality. Agatha Harkness is being played by Catherine Hahn in this, so she's going to be possibly involved in the plot. She's tied to Mephisto, so Mephisto might be kind of pulling the strings in all of this. But
Ooh, Mephisto might be like creating the
yeah,
reality. Actually, I think
yeah.
that'd be cool. That'd be
Hmm.
dope.
That might tie
Um,
to Doctor Strange also, which is what a lot of people are saying. Why a lot of
right,
people are
right,
thinking
right.
that might be where this is going. But that's kind of what I
So
think is going to open it, I guess.
right. So there was a lot of Easter eggs too. Like a lot of, we saw the old classic comic book accurate costumes, which looked like they were homemade. But what about you, Walt? Like where do you see, what did you gather from the trailer? What do you expect? What do obviously, I got the idea from you that we're looking at like just, or at least maybe the possibility of like just different eras per episodes. But how are you expecting this to be tied in, with
Well,
the rest of the MCU?
see, here's the thing. And one other important character before I get into it, Monica Rambeau is going to be in this show, so that's going to be super exciting, and maybe it speaks to the
Hmm.
direction of Captain Marvel. But one of the
Yeah.
things that worries me a little bit about the show, and it's not the show itself, but the way it's positioned in this timeline. And again, this is all because of COVID-19, but if I remember correctly, this show was supposed to tie in really heavily with Doctor Strange and
Yeah.
the multiverse of madness, right? But
Yes.
now, because everything's been pushed back, this show is coming out in 2020. Doctor Strange doesn't come out for another 2 years. And so, I wonder if the connections that are
I
being made in this show is kind of going to get lost in everything else, because in between that, you're going to have um, things like, the Winter Soldier, you're going to have the Loki show. I don't remember which movies are coming up, but you're going to have Black Widow. So there's going to be at least 3 to 4 projects before we even get to what this show was supposed to tie into originally. And
Well,
so,
No,
so
no, not necessarily. Not necessarily. See, here's the thing. I actually think that Doctor Strange is going to be the end book to WandaVision. If WandaVision is the first end book and you have all the other
phase
series in between and
5.
stuff, Doctor Strange is the end book that ties everything together.
Well, this is
no,
phase
no,
four.
I think
Four
that
now, right?
yeah.
So this would be, yeah, yeah. I agree with Gabe.
yeah,
WandaVision
I think
starts
that
it
that's
kind of.
I think that it'll work out better this way. That's why I think that this is, the best way to do it. Because again, WandaVision is going to be one of those shows that's going to be so cryptic that I felt like it doesn't. It's almost like when you read a book, you have the epilogue. The
Hmm.
epilogue is, the chapter in the book that starts before the chapter one, and the epilogue, you don't know what the epilogue is. You aren't supposed to understand the characters, the plot. You don't understand anything, but it gives you crumbs and tidbits that
Hmm.
only make sense later, way later in the book. You know
Right.
what I mean? They've been introduced to you, but it's so much later.
Yeah, but
And I feel
don't
like
you
this is going to be a good epilogue.
aren't you afraid that those very, very minute crumbs would kind of get lost
I don't think
because
so.
of
I don't
because of
know.
the timing of it
I don't
and
think
stuff?
so.
You
Nah,
know,
I don't think so. Just because it's Marvel. Once again, Marvel has given us. I
no
think that
doubt,
we've
no
all,
doubt.
as fans, have been able to create like this kind of, contract with Marvel, and Marvel's done a really good job of protecting, that contract. Like we trust.
Hmm.
I think that it's safe to say that we trust them. You know what I mean? Even the way that they, brought in Falcon and all that stuff. Like, that's controversial, right? To like pass it off to Falcon and then create a series directly for him, but
Hmm.
no one's batting an eye about it. You know what I mean? So, um, Jose, where, what do you think?
Well, I was mostly going to, I guess, second some of your thoughts as well, because I think that the big thing to your point, Walt, is that this is going to be such a, to me, this show is going to be a huge alteration of the MCU. I think it's pretty apparent, um, and also in kind of these details getting lost. I think in the shuffle of all the movies and TV shows that are coming out, I don't think that I'm going to worry about that, because, like Gabe said, the way that Marvel has set up all these Easter eggs and these little breadcrumbs that pay off later on over time has been so well done so far. I can give you an example, because yesterday I saw the Winter Soldier for like the first time in a couple of years. And one of the little things, one of the little details that's so interesting that you notice in a rewatch is that, and it's not a huge thing, but like the song that's playing when Nick Fury is injured and sneaks into Cap's house, right? The song that's playing is the same song that plays at the very end of the Infinity Saga when Cap is dancing with Agent Carter. So like those details just come back in like a perfect order. But like to really quickly speak to the point of how this is going to be really altering the MCU, we talk so much about how this is possibly a lot like the Wanda Maximoff storylines from the comics, where she alters reality and says no more mutants and all that kind of stuff. And the big Easter egg for me in this trailer is the bottle of wine that she's pouring when she's just doing like some bewitched stuff and like using her magic to move stuff around the house and like do chores. She's pouring a bottle of wine, and the bottle of wine is Maison. I'm going to butcher the French a little bit here, but it's Maison de Mépris or something along those lines.
Okay.
Maison means house in French. So it's House of M on this bottle of wine. Literally, the Easter egg is right there. And at the end of it, at the end of the
I mean,
trailer,
that's
like,
huge. That's
yeah, it's
so
huge.
huge.
The reality that Monica Rambeau kind of flies into, um, I don't know. I just get vibes of like X-Men films.
Yeah.
So I kind of see this is going to be such a big influence on the MCU going forward that we're not going to have the ability to forget some of the big details in this.
Let me point one more thing out
Mhm.
from the trailer that I was kind of excited about is the twins. And the twins for
Yeah.
me is really exciting because
Wicked
if
and
you
Speed.
know, yeah, exactly. If you know who
Uh-huh.
they are, Wiccan and Speed, this could be the start. And we've already have a little things here and there. We have little breadcrumbs here and there of
Hmm.
Young Avengers, you know,
Yeah.
because
Hmm.
you wonder if they're obviously going to outlive any of the characters of the show, and we've already had you know I'm sorry, Hawkeye's daughter that's out there. Um,
Hmm.
there are little crumbs here and there that they're kind of seeding for Young Avengers. So that to me is also exciting.
Iron Lad. Let's not forget his kind of planting in the universe. But I
Yeah.
agree. 100%.
Yep.
There's a lot
So,
of cool Easter
so
eggs and details.
I did want to go back to the Maison of M, the House of M thing. For those of you guys that don't know what House of M is, House of
Oh
M
yeah.
was
Hmm.
a core little mini series as part of obviously Marvel's whole thing, but specifically a mutant side from the X-Men kind of side of Marvel and all that stuff. Um, the series basically involved, and actually now that I'm thinking about it, now that I'm kind of like rehashing what House of M is, it actually kind of totally makes sense what's going on just from the trailer, where the entire trailer is almost like an Easter egg, I think, for House of M, not just that bottle of wine, because
Yeah.
House of M has to deal with Scarlet Witch suffering a mental breakdown
Hmm.
and not knowing that she's suffering a mental breakdown, right? Because maybe she really is the one that's kind of changing her reality, but not realizing it because of the mental breakdown. Maybe she's trying to like recreate the world where she's, you know, still with Vision and all that. Because again,
Hmm.
don't forget that Vision is dead, right?
And he has the Mind Stone in
So
his head in this trailer
what
too.
else? What else? What else? What else could cause a mental breakdown for her? maybe realizing that like her life is over without Vision and so on and so forth, and she's
Well, she
trying to
did
recreate
kill
like
him.
the happy times with Vision. However, Vision himself is like, wait a minute, I'm dead. What's going on, right?
And
Like,
she
I think
did
that
kill him.
that is, huh?
The first
She
time.
did kill him.
Right, she did. So it's
You
like the
know
traumatic experience of like maybe
exactly.
going through that. Maybe she exactly, and that would be huge because that tells us a big, big, big deal about like where Marvel wants to take the mutant storyline now that they've acquired Fox and all the licenses for the mutants. You
Definitely.
know, it'd
I
be
agree. The
because it would be
bottles.
super sick. Oh my god, that the ramifications of this are huge, right? Because if this is the case, then we're going to Age of Apocalypse, territory.
Done properly.
And to me, Age of Apocalypse done properly
Hmm.
is the best thing. I think Age of Apocalypse should be a series, not a movie. I think they should do Age of Apocalypse as a series because there's parts of Age of Apocalypse that happens in an alternate reality where Magneto is the leader of the X-Men. It was just super super cool. So I think that like uh if this is the case, if they are gonna tell the House of M storyline, I think this is like one of the best ways to introduce it.
They could
So yeah,
take one of the X-Men and turn that into a show and maybe tie it in that way and still have the movies. That would actually probably be a good idea, the way that you put it,
The
because you
good
could take
thing,
like
maybe or maybe
Magneto,
or
make a
maybe they
Magneto show
reintroduce. No, 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 no. What if
or
they
something.
what if they
What do you think?
reintroduce the mutants and the X-Men with a House of M series that we don't know about coming in the future?
that's
Yeah,
the
I
good
mean,
thing, because Marvel Studios before all of this, their TV shows had nothing to do with the MCU.
yeah.
And now the good thing is that they've made the effort to say, you know what, these series are part of the MCU. They'll tie it back in. So that suggestion that you made, Gabe, where they would take series and flesh them out and then throw them into movies would make perfect sense.
Hmm. I agree. I think that the way that they're tying all of these shows together now, it's a win-win situation. It's almost a no-brainer to do it that way.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
They're
is.
already
exactly.
doing it
It's a
that
it's a
way.
no-brainer, yeah.
It
And
seems
it's
like
also a
with the
way
shows.
that, like even if they are taking MCU as a whole into Secret Wars, they can
Oh, I
follow
would
Secret
love
Wars up
that.
with House of M.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I
Gosh.
think that they're doing it because if you think about it, like what better way to introduce Secret Wars than to do it with Nick Fury's own show, which they just officially announced,
Oh my
right?
gosh. I would
Like
love
there's
Secret
no better
Wars.
way than to like do Secret Wars than to do it with Shield and bringing the mutants in little by little. And it's just, I think that is the culmination of everything that's going on. It's going to be Secret Wars, then House of M at the end of that. Or tied in somewhere there.
I
I think that's
Dude,
really
you said
where it's
Secret
going to go.
Wars. I need to take a break because that just blows my mind. Secret Wars is one of my all-time favorite storylines. You know what I'm saying? I still have the
Secret
old
Wars.
books. Oh, I love it. You know what I'm saying? One of the things one of the covers that I love is the one of Doctor Doom, and he's all broken up and messed up. I actually
oh yeah, yeah.
drew that because it's just one of my all-time favorite covers and stuff. Secret Wars on the screen, I would lose my mind.
Yeah, I mean, Secret Wars, I think, was
My
the
gosh.
pivotal moment in comic books, especially in Marvel, that changed the way comic book stories were told. Because
The
Secret
Russos
Wars
want to
was
do
the
that also, right?
I
yeah, they
believe
do.
so. Yeah.
Secret Wars is a
Yeah.
Secret Wars. It was the storyline that kind of brought every single comic into one story.
Sign me
And
up.
it was like the start of like it's basically the granddaddy of like universes, so to speak,
Yeah.
like Marvel
The
Cinematic
whole
Universes. You have like this is the Marvel
ensemble.
universe, and this is how we have the entire all our properties tied into one. So,
Yeah.
um,
It was like
Jose,
Crisis on Infinite Earths before Crisis on Infinite Earth was Crisis on
right?
Infinite Earths,
Exactly. Yeah,
basically.
basically. Yeah,
um,
Crisis on Infinite Earths was basically kind of the answer or the reply from DC. So,
I do have a quick question though, because and this might be for another podcast actually, because this is I don't want to say it's a loaded question, but when we're talking about Secret Wars, the important question is, like I said, this might be another topic for another podcast. Which Secret Wars? Because there's
I
what,
want
three
the
of them?
original one.
You want the original?
I
The new
want the
one is good.
original.
oh, it's
The
got to
new
be
one
the
is good as
original one,
well.
man. We got to do the
Yeah.
original one.
The other ones are, you know what? The other ones, you can do that kind of like a flashpoint type of thing
Hmm.
because The
or what
one
if
that I
maybe.
remember, yeah, well, not even, because you know what? If they ever wanted to remake the universe, they
Hmm.
can do that with that second Secret Wars, I believe, right? That's the one where you had
More
the army of
so,
Thors, and they took all the
Yeah,
or that,
universes and they put
yeah,
them on
Doctor
Secret Wars
Doom.
Battlefield.
2.
Dr.
Yeah,
Doom used Molecule Man to
Yeah,
like and the
exactly.
Beyonders to control
yeah.
reality and
So
rebuild
I
it. Yeah.
would I would actually hold that in my pocket in case, you get your actors starting to age out of these things. That's the
Ah,
best way to do a
So
quote unquote flashpoint in the MCU. At least that's
right.
what I
So
think.
it's funny because the second Secret Wars, which is not so much of a secret, was meant for Marvel to rein in like their comics that were floundering, rein in
There you
their
go.
properties that weren't doing well that they needed to cancel. And it's like, all right, we need to kind of end all this. It's very
clean
much
it up.
how like with X Men as a comic book line was kind of floundering over the last decade, and they passed it over to Jonathan Hickman to kind of take over it.
Yeah.
And with House of X and Powers of 10, it was like, all right, we're going to create this entire new giant mega explosion in this universe, mainly so that we can restart it without people realizing that we're restarting it necessarily. Um, so with that being said, anything else that you guys want to add about WandaVision before we move on to the huge gaming news that came out?
Super excited.
It's gonna be awesome.
Yep.
All right.
Yeah.
I think I'm more excited now after, us talking about it than I was when I saw the trailer. I'm like so much more excited now.
We'll
Hopefully
get
our
you into
listeners
Before
are
we move
also.
on, huh,
Yeah.
what was that?
Hopefully our listeners are also.
Oh, I'm sure they
I
are.
hope I
Oh,
hope
by
we
the
got you
way,
guys excited for WandaVision.
The
by the way,
implication.
I want to do a huge thank you to the listeners that are, um, sharing and subscribing. You guys have like our numbers are huge right now,
Yes.
and
Thank you guys.
we're back to kind of like our old, numbers and stuff. I know that the quarantine has like kicked us out a little bit out of our routines, but thank you so much for listening. So moving on.
We love you
Um,
guys. Yay.
so the other big news the hugest news that came out was
Biggest
Microsoft buying Bethesda. They
ever.
bought Bethesda for $7 billion
That's
to
pretty
buy
cheap.
the ownership of their studios and all their properties.
That's more
Um, I
that's
don't know
more
if it's
than
cheap.
well, it's more than
I
Disney
mean,
paid for Star Wars. That's
That
more than
is
Disney paid for
true.
Star
But that was way back when.
That's true.
I suppose, but see, the difference is, yeah, it was way back when, and they bought. When it comes to film, it's a little bit different, right? Because you're buying IP
That's true.
properties,
Yeah,
which
yeah,
they
that's
could
true.
have they could have done with
Yeah.
Bethesda, but Bethesda they also bought all the studios as well as the contracts essentially for all the employees that they have, right? Like, they're not just buying the IPs to all the properties that they've created.
Right.
They've bought all the studios and technologies that Bethesda themselves have created as well. So there's a lot that goes into like buying out a game studio. I think back to when Warner Brothers bought Midway. Warner Brothers bought Midway specifically for the IP, so they shuttered all of the Midway studios. Right, that was kind of like obviously Midway was floundering and stuff like that, but Warner Brothers literally bought Midway just for Mortal Kombat. They canceled all their other properties. They closed down all the studios, which sucks because they've had to let go of hundreds and hundreds of employees across 4 different studios. But it was mainly for the IPs. When it came to Bethesda,
Mortal
Bethesda being as
Kombat.
big as they are with however many other smaller studios under their umbrella, we're talking about a company that has thousands of employees across I think like a dozen studios worldwide. So yeah, the this has huge implications because Bethesda has uh, probably one of the biggest properties to perform on Sony PlayStation, their direct competitor, which is Elder Scrolls and Oblivion and whatnot. So
Huge
Microsoft now
game.
basically has the opportunity. It's almost like they have the guillotine on Sony. They can choose to drop that guillotine and be like, hey, you know what? From now on, every single Elder Scrolls game is now exclusive to Xbox. And it's not just Elder Scrolls, but they have Doom and so many other major properties that they can take away from Sony. So, which I think is huge because Bethesda owns essentially all the biggest Western RPGs,
Yeah,
you
they
know,
do.
and Sony being a
Yeah.
huge RPG platform, that's a kind of a big deal. So, Jose,
I mean, just to clarify, the way that the news is being reported is that Microsoft bought Bethesda, but to kind of put this in a larger perspective, they didn't actually buy Bethesda. They bought their parent company, Zenimax Media, which includes Bethesda, and that's why, like you mentioned, they have all these huge IPs, which includes id Studios, creator of some of the most iconic games of all time, like Doom and Wolfenstein. But like, if you think about the games that they now have in their stable, and the way that Sony has to respond is going to have to be huge, because Sony last generation, right? They were the big first party single player kind of console, right? If you like to play story driven single player games, role playing games, things of that nature, you got a Sony PlayStation. That's the best way to go about it, because you have games like Drake's Adventure and Horizon Zero Dawn and Ghost of Tsushima, games we've been playing a lot recently. These huge first party, not really multiplayer focused games. Microsoft was kind of the opposite, but now Microsoft is covering all of that umbrella, because Microsoft was more the multiplayer. I would say they had the Halo like games and things like that, and they kind of suffered, and that's the reason why people didn't buy Microsoft's console, among other things, among some mistakes they made the last generation early on, because their first party experiences and their first party games weren't as big as what Sony was offering. But now the games that they have to match Sony, Spider-Man can be matched by Fallout. All these big properties, they can match 1-to-1. And I'm not even gonna. We got to get into this obviously later. The implications of all this stuff being released on Game Pass day one, in most cases, friggin' huge. Before we even talk about like if Microsoft wants to decide to make certain games exclusive to their console or not, that's huge.
So Game Pass is going to be a really, really huge thing. But before we get to Game Pass, I want to let Walter chime in, simply because you have the list of all the studios now that are comparatively owned by Sony versus Microsoft. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Take it away.
Before we get into that, I do believe that somebody did say that while Microsoft does own Bethesda, they are going to be looking at the games case by case to see if whether it's going to be Microsoft exclusive or they're going to make it available to Sony's platform. So, the implication is that, they can be super greedy and say, you have to go get an Xbox to get the game that we have, but they haven't been that draconian yet. And I do emphasize the words yet, because right now there are a couple of games that are still in development that will hit both consoles, including Deathloop and Ghostwire Tokyo.
Mm-hmm.
But when pressed on whether or not everything else is going to be exclusive, their boss Phil Spencer said, we're going to take other consoles on a case by case basis. So just because they have Bethesda does not necessarily mean that it's going to be exclusive to Microsoft, but you can read the tea leaves, right?
Yeah, that's true. But I will say, I was going to mention this a little bit later, but I will say that Phil Spencer has been on record saying that Bethesda will operate semi-independently.
Yes,
So
exactly.
I feel like that's going to be like, hey, Bethesda, do your own thing. However, when we need to step in and be like, hey, this is more or less what we want, they're going to step in, but they're not going to like take over the direction that they're going. And we'll get into this a little bit later, but I personally have my own thoughts on like how Microsoft is going to operate with Sony. So, but yeah,
so let's get into those studios, right? So, in terms of hardware, we kind of know that the Xbox Series X is the more potent of the two consoles, right? I think everybody agrees on that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what's going to make or break the consoles has always been software and games, okay? And so, I did a kind of a little chart here on the studios that are owned by both companies. So I'm going to go through this really, really quick, because believe it or not, some of this list is actually pretty big. So I'm going to hit Microsoft first, because obviously that's what we're talking about. So they own Mojang, which is known for Minecraft. They own Arcane Studios, which Dishonored, Prey, those are the games that they have. Double Fine, which is Psychonauts. Turn 10, which is Forza. If you're into racing games, that's like the one of the top on the Xbox. They own the Coalition, which is known for Gears of War.
Mhm.
343 Industries, you guys should know what that is, but just in case you don't, that's Halo. All right. They also own
Little game.
Playground Games, which is
Mhm.
known for Forza Horizon and Fable. id Software, which is part of Bethesda, which is Doom, Quake, and Rage. Ninja Theory, which they do Hellblade. Bethesda, obviously. Elder Scrolls, Fallout, Starfield. Obsidian, which is the Outer Worlds, Fallout, New Vegas. They own Rare, which is Battletoads. I'm not too familiar with that one.
Mhm.
Undead Labs, State of Decay, World's Edge, Age of Empires, Zenimax Online, Elder Scrolls Online, Alpha Dogs. Those are more mobile games. Compulsion games, We Happy Few, I'm not too familiar with that. Machine games, Wolfenstein,
Mhm.
In Exile, which is Wasteland, and Tango, which is The Evil Within, and Ghostwire Tokyo, which is also part of Bethesda. Okay, so those are the game studios that Microsoft owns. Here's the ones that Sony owns. You have Polyphony Digital, and any racing fan would know that that's Gran Turismo. I mean, that goes
Mhm.
way back to
Forza.
the original PlayStation. Oh, Gran Turismo, dude, is awesome, though. I believe it or not,
We've got
part
memories.
of my race, I've raced cars on tracks before and stuff, and part of the things that I learned in Gran Turismo actually
Oh yeah,
helped me do that.
absolutely,
You know what I'm saying? I remember the first
absolutely.
Gran Turismo had a big booklet talking about racing.
Yeah, I
That's
remember it
how
was super
deep they
thick.
were. You know?
Yeah, yeah, I remember that. Had the Skip Barber coupon in the back. Go to racing school and
Exactly.
everything. You know what I mean? But I
So
don't
there
know,
you
man. I
go.
feel like Gran Turismo is like falling to the wayside for me. Anyway,
Oh, I do
go
like the
on.
new game, but I digress. Okay, so you have Polyphony Digital, you have Guerrilla Games, which they did Killzone, they did Horizon Zero Dawn. You have SIE London Studio, which is SingStar, and that's a very I don't know if you guys know that. That's kind of like a karaoke game, but
Mhm.
they're mainly focused now on PSVR, which interestingly we haven't heard anything about in terms of the next generation. But I digress.
Yeah.
A new acquisition of SEIE Manchester. You have Media Molecule, which does Little Big Planet. SEI XDev Europe, which does Until Dawn, and the awesome, very underrated Detroit Become Human. SIE Ben Studio, which is Days Gone. Insomniac Games. You guys know that. That's
Mhm.
Marvel's Spider-Man. But they also do Spyro the Dragon and Ratchet and Clank. Naughty Dog, Jose, you're a big fan of them because they
Indeed.
are the guys that do The Last of Us, but they also have Crash Bandicoot, Jack and Daxter, and Uncharted. And Gabe, I know
Hey,
you laugh, but you know what?
hey,
Let's stay off The
hey.
Last of Us because we'll never finish this podcast.
It makes money. But yeah,
There you go.
what other properties
All right,
are
I'm
you
almost
thinking
done
of?
because their list is not as big. They have Pixelopus. I hope I said that right. They do a game called Entwined. I'm not too familiar with that. SIE San Diego Studio, which is MLB The Show, and the new Uncharted game. Apparently, they are going to be the ones doing it. SIE Santa Monica Studio, that's a favorite of Dre's, AJ. That's the studio that created the God of War. And last but not least, this is one of my favorite studios, Sucker Punch. Sly Cooper, Infamous, and my most favorite game of all time, Ghosts of Tsushima. Those are the studios that both of these companies own. What do you guys think?
I think that like obviously, I still think that Sony has a more compelling list of story-driven games. Obviously, with the exception of now, you know, under Bethesda and their Elder Scrolls properties and stuff, and Fallout, those have obviously compelling story mode games, stories in general. But I still think that like Sony has probably um, the cream of the crop when it comes to story driven games. Uh, but I don't know. I
Microsoft has
don't
some
know how Sony.
pretty good games though, man.
They
You
do.
know?
No. They absolutely do. They absolutely do. I still think that like if you're gonna like compare the lists of the games. I think that's where Sony's strong suit is going to be, versus where Microsoft's strong suit is going to be Game Pass and video game availability, which I want to talk about in a little bit. But um, what I'd like to know um, is essentially, where do you see, like, or how do you see Microsoft using this newfound power there? It's almost like Microsoft got like one of the major Infinity Stones in their gauntlet now,
Oh my
right?
god,
How do you
that
see
is so
Sony
true.
responding? First of all, how do
This
you see Sony responding, and also like how does this strengthen Microsoft?
They go
And
by
I'll throw this to
Sega.
you, Jose. Oh
well,
my God, dude, that's a whole different wish. I wish so
I
Microsoft
would
would buy
love
Sega,
that.
because not only would they have like the Sega properties for video games and stuff, but they would also have like Sega's newfound passion for film.
Yeah,
Um, but
Like
again, that's a
Sonic,
whole
yeah.
separate thing. That's wishful thinking.
yeah. I'll let
We want
Jose
to talk.
speak
I
to
want to talk
this.
about how this is gonna strengthen Microsoft's gauntlet.
I'm gonna go even further than you did, saying that this is an Infinity Stone in their gauntlet. I think that this acquisition is the gauntlet because of how many studios they just acquired. Like they instantly just shut down the conversation about how Sony has the better first party, genre notwithstanding, has the better first party selection of games. Because now, if you look at the advantages that Microsoft has in terms of genre, like you mentioned earlier, Gabe, and like we've talked about, they have the Western RPG market with Fallout, with Elder Scrolls. They have first person shooters kind of over Sony, because Sony has more third person shooters and games like that, third person adventure games, because they have Halo and they have Doom, among other games right now. So they have that huge advantage because of some of those properties and some of those genres that are big. Obviously, RPGs are huge. Open world games are huge. They kind of both systems have that, I think, in spades now. But I think that this is a gauntlet level. Like Bethesda's Zenimax acquisition is going to change it so much to the point that I don't know that this is going to necessarily change the way that the last console generation went, where PlayStation outsold Microsoft, I think, almost 3-1. They sold over 100 million PlayStation 4s, but it's not going to be anywhere near as skewed as it once was, because after this, like the amount of offerings, like you said, Gabe, the story driven offerings go a little bit to Sony, but now there's no clear winner in some of these genres either, because of these studios that we don't even mention overall. We talk big about like Bethesda and id Software, but those smaller studios, some of the smaller studios that Walt mentioned, that are releasing some of these really, really
Right,
interesting single
right.
player experiences, that enters into the conversation as well.
Right, but see, this is where I say that it's no longer going to be about first party, third party,
Mhm.
what games they have. It's what services they have. Microsoft has been on the services boat for a long time. They just haven't executed it properly. Remember that the 360 was supposed to be about services, about streaming and making the console more about an entertainment thing with the Connect and all that stuff. They've been on the whole services thing for a long time, and I think that, like, they made some mistakes with the 360, and rather the Xbox One, and 360 and the Xbox One, but specifically with the Xbox One. But they still are fighting that fight to build services, and now with Game Pass and having all these new games launching, or that are going to be on Game Pass. Remember, they just announced that Doom Eternal is going to be on Game
Yeah.
Pass on the day one of the Series X coming out. I mean, that's huge for me, because I too, even though I'm a little bit more of an Xbox fan than a Sony fan,
Mhm.
I too have been kind of on the fence about buying a new system, because it's like, if there's nothing specifically coming out, then why do it? But with the Xbox Series X coming out, Game Pass, and these new games, these new properties that I've been wanting to play for a long time coming out, why, like, now I have an incentive to play on the Series X, simply because of their pricing structure that they have, as well as the ability to play
Mhm.
these games that have come out a long time ago already at this point, or
Huge.
even some of the
Mhm.
newer games at at better quality. Like, it's like, why not for me at this point?
Yeah.
So, Walt, what do you think as far as how Sony's feeling right now, how they're going to respond, and as far as how this is going to impact the next gen launches. Since there really aren't going to be anything available at the launch.
Right. So before we get into that, I just wanted to touch on something that you mentioned in terms of services, because I did see that there was something interesting that came over the wires this week.
Hmm.
And I don't know a lot of people that caught this, but the Xbox app that's on mobile,
Yeah.
they are redoing it, and right now it's in a beta. Uh, it's in beta right now, but what they're doing is that they're creating the ability, and similar to something that PlayStation already has, but they are creating the ability to stream your games within the household onto any mobile device that you may have. So if you have an iPad, if you have a laptop,
Hmm. Hmm.
that's something that they've never done. You've always had to get a third party app to be able to do that,
Well,
and even
really
then,
quick.
it didn't work very well.
Really quick, Walt. Like, actually, I was on the beta for this for a while. It's been a
Mhm.
beta for a long time, and the thing that I want to say really quickly that's actually a big implication for me so far is that when I try to stream games on Microsoft service versus Sony's service, I have huge issues with Sony's streaming offerings. I haven't had that issue with Microsoft on the same connections in the
Mhm.
same household, same connection speeds.
Right.
Microsoft has streamed with more quality than some of Sony's offerings, so
And
that's
you're
something to
streaming,
consider as
You
well.
you're
know, I got,
streaming
I got,
from your
I got
console, right?
Yeah, yeah, but
Okay.
also not only that, but also streaming it from Microsoft or Sony's servers as well. Both of
Well,
those
right. So I
things have
wanted to
worked
speak
better
on
with
that. I
Microsoft.
wanted to speak on that simply because
Hmm.
the this is how I feel about the streaming. Is I feel like Sony's streaming service is essentially kind of like an afterthought, to be honest with you. I don't
Yeah.
think that I think they tacked it onto like their infrastructure, their hardware and software infrastructure, as a response to Game Pass. Whereas Microsoft has made their streaming kind of the infrastructure for their hardware and their software.
Hmm.
The technologies that Sony has put it in the PS4, and I believe moving into the PS5, especially going back to the PS3, it's always been about like their super proprietary like hardware, and the software has to work directly with their hardware in a certain specific way. And that has what ends up happening with that is that you have obviously a vertical kind of integration of a platform, but then it makes it difficult to introduce things like a streaming service and so on and so forth. So I think that has to do with the fact that like Sony has kind of made it an afterthought, and it's going to be hard to catch up, I think. Because the
especially
more they're
now.
getting closer to Microsoft, the more Microsoft is just going to be, expanding, expanding, expanding. They're going to be the Netflix of the gaming industry, where they're going to
Yep.
end up being too big,
And you
to
also have
compete
to
with.
look at the thing that they're trying to roll out now, which is xCloud, which is huge,
Right,
because
right,
now
Right.
exactly.
you are
Hmm.
going to be able to play Xbox games on your mobile device. You
Which
know,
again runs really well. I played
Exactly.
WWE 2K20. I don't own that game. I
right.
played it multiplayer with a couple of friends, and it
I
ran
think I
really
think
well
you
on
and I
my
are,
phone.
I think you and I are talking about different apps though, because
No, no,
you're
no,
talking
I'm
about
not.
the Xbox,
This is the X Cloud. I was because X Cloud was a beta for a long time.
right? But I'm
I
not
was
talking about that.
no.
Originally, I wasn't talking about that. I was
Okay.
talking about the Xbox app proper. Xbox has an
Yeah.
app on iOS which now is in beta, and it allows you to connect to your console within the home. Now,
Right.
xCloud is a different
I'm sorry, Walt,
service.
to cut you off. Let me just clarify. Like that functionality that's in that app now is what I'm saying I was a part of beforehand. So I
That's
was
what's
using
rolled out
that.
like recently.
They just added it to Xbox, but there was an app. I think it was actually only on Android since like November of last year that allowed you to stream to your Android device with an Xbox controller mobile games that either you owned from your home console or from their servers.
Okay.
So yeah, this has been maybe it's an Android thing
No, I
that I've
think
been able
that's
to access for a
iOS, but
while,
that
and also
xCloud,
you were able to do it in Windows as well.
yeah,
But I
isn't
don't
that
think
xCloud though?
it's
That's
both actually because there's two different services, and the way that it works is a little confusing. Now they're all kind of rolling it into one app, and that's why now you're getting that all that functionality in the iOS app, but on
no, but
Android for a
the
while
X
those functionalities were split up, into two
xCloud
different
is not
apps.
coming to iOS, at least not right now. So that's why I say we're talking about two different apps. We're talking about the Xbox app proper, which
Game
only
Pass.
allows you to. It's almost like remote play for PS4.
That's Game Pass then, because
No, it's not.
that's new Game Pass
No,
functionality.
no, 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 it's not. This app allows you to connect to your console. So think of it this way: if
Mhm.
I'm at home and I'm watching TV, and my son, and either AJ or Eli wants to play the Xbox, but I'm on the TV, they
Right.
now have the ability with this Xbox app beta
Yeah.
to connect to the console and play on their screen, whatever mobile
Right.
device they
Yeah.
have. The
Yeah, I see
X
this on the
Cloud
App
is
Store.
Yeah.
different. The X Cloud allows you to get into Game Pass without connecting to the console. So that's why I say there are
Right.
two different apps. I think we're talking about two different things here.
You know
Okay.
what it is, and I don't.
And I know it's
The
confusing.
XCloud app gave you the option to do both of those things before. That's probably where
Right.
the confusion is,
Okay.
because you
And that's
could
what
do
it
that from
is.
the XCloud app. You could connect to your home console
Right.
as well.
This is
Anyways,
now
yeah,
Right.
something
let's not get
different.
lost in the weeds on that. Sorry about that.
Right. Okay. So they're two different things. Now, the thing is, with the xCloud coming onto iOS, of course, Apple is making it difficult because they don't want to allow them to get on it because of their, App Store policy. So what they want Microsoft to do is to release separate apps for games, and that's how you connect, which is impossible if you think about it. So they're making it very difficult for Microsoft to get
Yeah.
onto the App Store, you know.
Hmm.
But going back to what Gabe threw it over to me for, and I'm going to ask Jose this because you touched upon this before. We're all great about how Microsoft is doing all of this stuff, and they have all these studios, and Game Pass is going to be awesome. But how do you think this impacts this next gen launch window right now? Because even though they have all these games, they're not really, there's nothing new that's coming out of it in terms of launch, whereas Sony already has kind of their stuff going. And quite honestly, to me, I think the Sony launch list of games is probably a little bit better than Microsoft.
Probably, yeah.
How do you think this in the long run to me makes Xbox a better purchase, I guess, if you want to say that. But you know how people are, they're very in the now. So do you think that this news is really going to impact the launch window, or is this more down the line? But by that time, would it be too late for Xbox to catch up?
So, real. What I believe, I'll say, is this: like, in terms of affecting the launch window, I don't think this is going to affect the launch of too many games or the scheduling of launching certain games on Sony's end or Microsoft's end. I think both consoles have kind of dedicated themselves to the proposition that now, because of a variety of reasons, including COVID, they're not trying to wow you necessarily with their launch lineups. They're trying to wow you with the what ifs on their consoles. But one thing that I find really telling, that I think is going to be a part of how Sony is going to have to adjust their strategy, because I think they set it in motion a little bit. If you think about it, what the heck was the point of releasing a digital version of PlayStation 5 unless you had some idea to lean into streaming games a little bit more? If you think about it,
I
it
don't
has to
know.
be, in a way. Well, think of it
I don't
this
know.
way,
I don't think
because,
so.
well, let me say,
It
like,
has to
because
be
if you
this
look at it in
way.
terms of, well, look at it this way: it's in terms of a small amount of actions, not just the fact that they have that digital PlayStation 5, but let's also, remember what Walt said. It's not a great offering yet, but, or actually, I'm not sure if you mentioned this, but Sony recently released like 100 of their classic or more popular games, just like Game Pass does, where they release some more current or more popular games in order to entice people into their PlayStation Now service. So, to your point, and I'll let you make your point and disagree or agree with whatever's being said here, Gabe. I think that Sony understands that they have to kind of plant the breadcrumbs for these things, and they were waiting maybe to see what Microsoft was going to do, since they're ahead in that space, and they're going to react to it. Which, in Sony's case, since they have the lead in the console wars, I think is the right strategy. Wait to see how well this strategy works for Microsoft, And then if it's something that really starts to separate Microsoft or change the console war, then Sony has to really invest in those services. But again, they just kind of planted the breadcrumbs.
See, I don't think that that's accurate simply because I see Sony right now as Blockbuster and Microsoft as
Mhm.
Netflix, right? They're not taking, I don't think that they
Ooh,
took Microsoft's streaming seriously because for me,
that's a
they're offering,
chilling
no,
comparison
but
if
it's
you
a
think
little,
about it.
the reason I say that is because it's true that of course they're offering a a disc version of the PS5 versus a discless version, but the reason for that is no different than when Mac started
Mhm.
putting out MacBooks, some that had the DVD drive and some that didn't. It was mainly to have a cheaper offering. It's just for as they slowly move to a digital only industry, but their whole thing is still hardware more than anything.
Okay.
I don't think that they decided to like do a streaming, or rather a discless PS5 version for the sole purpose of like, well, we're going to be moving into streaming, because if streaming was what they were going to be moving into, I think they would have been investing more time in developing a streaming service versus developing two separate consoles.
I
You know
guess
what I
we'll
mean?
see what
Well,
happens with PS
Um,
now moving forward.
let me
If
just
yeah,
say
I mean,
this.
I think that
they
that's
leave.
kind of the biggest issue.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So
Let me just say this, and I'm going to look at the two different offerings and the differences between the two, because the Xbox Series X gives you a pretty lofty hard drive, and then the S version, which is the digital version, is much lower, right?
Oh,
But
terrible idea.
they have Game Pass, and so the implication there is that they are moving towards streaming. The PlayStation 5, interestingly enough, you have the disc version and the discless version. And I got to be careful how I say that last one because it could sound something like something else, right? But
Discless?
hey, relax. This is a
I didn't say
PG
anything wrong.
PG podcast.
Maybe
But
what you heard is something wrong, but I didn't
hey,
say a word.
you
I've
know
been
what?
watching The
Without
Boys way
saying the
too
actual
much,
word, without saying the actual
especially
word,
that
I
last
almost feel
episode of The
like,
Boys.
What's
oh
up?
my god,
Oh yeah.
You know what I'm
oh
talking
my
about.
god.
Shh,
No,
no
look,
spoilers.
honestly,
Yeah.
if you if you take off that S, that's kind of how I feel about Sony right now without a proper
Hey,
streaming service.
hello. Okay.
Oh, so that
So
blockbuster comparison makes sense.
yeah. So anyway, the thing about the PlayStation 5, which I find very interesting, is that the PlayStation 5, both versions, they offer the same hard drive. Now, while that sounds pretty cool, you also got to take into account PlayStation 5 games. They are huge when you download them. And that is going to be a huge problem. I mean, I'm looking at an article here that talks about the PlayStation 5 game sizes. You look at Demon Souls. Demon Souls, it's a 825 gigs of storage that you get in the PS5. Demon Souls is close to now 175 of that is it's a 1 terabyte. So 175 of it is of the gigs is just for the system, the hardware, right? The software. Demon Souls as a game is
Hmm.
105 gigs. That is 1/7 of the available
Yeah,
space on that hard drive. That's a problem. That is a problem. So
for both
if they're
consoles to a
not
certain extent.
going, but you know what? The PlayStation 5, they always are more the bigger of the two, because the Xbox, I have a terabyte on my Xbox. I have a completely separate hard drive. I
Uh-huh.
still have a ton of games on that. For the
I can
PlayStation
explain that.
5, which is the same size, I have to manage the games that are on there, because games like Call of Duty, they take up
A
almost
hundred
the
gigs.
entire thing. So I'm constantly, every time there's an update for Call of Duty, I've got to delete a game in order to update it. That's a
Yeah.
Well,
big problem.
they just
So
lowered the install
this
size on the recent one, I think, though, right?
this this is this is
A new update just came up. I had to delete a game in order to update the damn game.
I thought they reduced the install
so
size, though.
But
Anyway,
it's
doesn't
still
matter.
big.
yeah,
It's still
they
huge.
did, but like, yeah,
Hmm.
the install size is one thing, but like
Yeah,
that's just the initial install size. You still have to like keep downloading the new updates, and it just keeps
Exactly.
tacking on. So this all has
That's
to
a
do
big
with that
problem.
whole thing of like Sony always wanting to have proprietary hardware, and then the software being having to be built around it, right? So then what ends up happening is, like, for example, the PS5 is going to have a completely new hardware infrastructure that developers now have to, work around, learn, develop, and create, which a lot of times creates bigger install packages just because they have a lot of code that's not as efficient as opposed to Xbox, which is essentially just a standard PC with a few modifications
Hmm.
to its processing unit. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And that's what makes it easier to develop for a PC than it does for Sony. Now, don't forget that
And
with the Game Pass and xCloud, you don't just have the games on the Xbox and Series X. You'll have them on your PC too.
Yep.
listen,
And that's just gonna like again, like it's we're talking about like numbers here, you know?
I just need to make a quick correction. The game that this article was referring to was not Demon Souls. It was Spider-Man Miles Morales Ultimate Edition. That's the one that's 105
That's
gigabytes.
not even a full
Demon
Which is
game.
Souls,
just an expansion.
yeah,
That is
Demon
just an
Souls is
it's gonna
66
play.
gigs.
Yeah, it's gonna be its own game, but it's essentially still just an expansion
It's
of
105 gigs, dude.
that's freaking crazy.
Wait until Call of Duty Cold War on PS5. That's going to be
That's what
like
I was gonna say. So
400
basically, on
gigs.
the PS5, that's what I was gonna say.
That's
On the
going to be the
PS5,
entire
you have room
hard
for
drive.
You're going to have to buy
so
the expansion to install that.
60 to 70% of Xbox or PlayStation 5 users are gonna have Call of Duty and one other game. That's it.
And you wonder if this is a strategy for them because Xbox just released uh, a uh, a news article, a news release of their memory card is a terabyte. It's $200. Think about that. It's
Yeah.
almost as much as the actual console itself.
And you have to use it. You
Yeah,
can't
exactly.
use a external solid state drive or something like that. You have to
So
use
you wonder
Microsoft.
if this is
Right.
a strategy that they're employing, and
Maybe, but
we're
see,
dumb enough to do it.
right,
It
no,
might
but at
be.
the same time, let's take a
It
look
might
at
be.
like the lifelong of a console. It's going to be 7 to 10 years. I think the Series X is probably going to be like a 7 8 year console, and it's not unlike upgrading your PC's hard drive 4 or 5 years down the line and stuff like that, or even 2 3 years down the line. It's kind of similar to that, I would say. And like a terabyte solid state hard drive is gonna be a little over $100 as it is, and this is gonna be a more a
Yeah.
little bit more of an overpowered, solid state hard drive that's meant to work directly with this infrastructure. Now, I wanted to kind of go back
Hmm.
a little bit and, talk a little bit about like that whole like the release schedule and how it's going to impact. I think it will impact it in a certain way, right? Because like
Hmm.
think about a lot of the Xbox fans, maybe not too many Xbox. Well, we know that not as many Xbox ones were sold as the PS4s, but now with the Series X and the Game Pass and the new titles that are coming, especially with Doom Eternal, which is going to be a big seller for Xbox fans and stuff like that coming out, all those games are now part of the launch of Series X. Every game title that's in the Game Pass is essentially a launch title for them. For the people that are like new adopters to Xbox, or the people that are Xbox fans that didn't get a chance to play a lot of these games during the Xbox One's life cycle and stuff like that. All these games are now launch titles, whereas the PS5 doesn't have that library. You know, yet, at least until their PlayStation streaming service gets up to par. So I think that like that is where the launch title game is going to be played. It's in that little area. So what do you guys think of that?
So I think
I think
that's
you had it on mute for a moment.
yeah. I'm sorry, I had it on mute for a moment. I wanted to let you speak and not let the ambulances and hipsters of my area kind of overlap what you're saying. As far as affecting the launch window, my opinion on it. I still think I don't know if it's going to necessarily change the launch window for some of those games, although I do agree on some of the points that you just made. The question I have for you guys, though, actually, that I thought about that I think is important to kind of ask is if you look at the way that Microsoft is structuring their offerings with Game Pass, with xCloud, with the Xbox apps on the various platforms, you don't need a Microsoft console in many
Nope.
cases to actually play a lot of these games.
Not at
What do
all.
you think that's going to do in terms of selling the hardware? Because
So
like if you don't need
I
it, then
think
what the heck's the point necessarily? If you have an iPad
right.
and a
So I
controller,
have
you know,
So
go
I
on.
have I have I have something to add. That's why I say that Microsoft is not in the console war anymore.
Yeah.
I
They're in the
agree.
streaming wars. The console is now going to be a peripheral for them. But
They're
what they're looking
totally
towards
software.
is the yeah, all software, all streaming, whatever. If you can get the Game Pass and just have, your iOS tablet or just your PC, then great. Like they're
Hmm.
getting what they want, which is the memberships.
Yeah.
The
You got to buy a
Xbox Series
controller as
X
well. You know,
is
you still have to buy some
essentially,
hardware.
yeah, the Series X is just essentially another portal for them to gain memberships.
Hmm.
Again, they want to be Netflix. They want to get as many memberships now and as many studios now and properties now, so that 10 years from now, their library is too big to compete with, and their membership count is too wide to steal from and really make an impact. Right? Think about like all the services that have come out in the last 2 years trying to compete with Netflix that still really can't. I would say Disney Plus is probably the closest thing in quality shows that can compete with Netflix,
Prime
but
Video has some
HBO
good
has
stuff
its own
as well.
service and stuff like that. And I still would say that Netflix has the bigger power because Netflix is now at the point where they have their own studios and they're creating their own films specifically just for their streaming service. It's going to be 3-4 years down the line where you're going to see games. That's where the exclusive things are going to happen. It's which streaming game service is going to have exclusive streaming games, whereas on another platform you have to buy them. They might, the next Fallout might come out on PlayStation and Xbox, but you can stream it on Xbox if you have your, the $25 membership, or you have to buy it on PlayStation for 80.
Or stream it on your Microsoft PC, or stream it on your Apple
Exactly.
iPad.
Right. You don't even need to have
Fantastic.
the Series X. You can just, as long as you have that, like and it's really easy to budget out for most people. If you have Netflix, Disney Plus, and Amazon Prime, you're looking at, I don't know, what is that, like $30-$40 a month? Add
Something like that.
$25,
Amazon Prime, yeah.
$65. That's your cable service and all your gaming for $65 a month.
Yeah, just
That's
have
tough
your
to beat.
internet, and that's everything basically there.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
again,
That's hard to beat.
they're out switching the Nintendo Switch in a way too because of that portability.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
Let me ask you a question, because it's interesting that we're talking about streaming versus hardware, because um, there is another um, entrant into the streaming gaming
Mm-hmm.
wars
Mm-hmm.
and such. And it's interesting because there are two companies that are doing it, and they fall in line very similar to the two different major console um, offerings in terms of Sony and Microsoft. You have Google Stadia, which has been out for a little bit and hasn't really gotten a lot of traction. And the way that works is that they provide you with a little console, and you have the thing, and you purchase the games very similar to the way that PlayStation does it. This week, Amazon, it's interesting that we were talking about Amazon Prime and Netflix and all that stuff. Amazon jumped into it, and this is something that they've been working on for a while. And the way they're doing it is very interesting. And their offering is called the Amazon Luna. You don't
Right.
necessarily need a console. The only thing that you have to do is buy their controller and subscribe to their service. And what they're doing is very similar to the way Microsoft is doing it, because again, the controller is kind of the thing that you need, but you don't need a Fire TV. You can do this through the console. You can do this through the computer. And what they're doing is that currently for $5.99, you get a stable of games. Okay.
Right. So,
But the
Okay.
other thing that I find very, very interesting that they're doing that nobody else is doing is that they're going to open up channels. So, for example, they're supposedly the next channel that they're going to open, which is not necessary, and we don't have any pricing on this because it's still very early in the game, is the Ubisoft Studio channel. So basically, what you do is if you want to, if you like Ubisoft, and you can subscribe to this channel and play all their games. So now you're at a position where they're treating gaming almost as cable,
Yeah.
which I find very,
right.
very
So,
interesting.
So I did actually, I'm glad that you brought it up because I do kind of want to touch on it. So Amazon is taking a different approach to streaming as Microsoft. Microsoft wants to be Netflix, which is like this one service and you get every single thing that's under our umbrella. Whereas Amazon does it the way that their Prime membership works already, right? You have a Prime membership and then you can add HBO to it, you can add
Right.
Showtime, you can add Curiosity TV, you can add Nat Geo, all of them usually for like a $5 additional fee, which
Exactly.
is more or less what they're going, which is cool, but I don't think it's going to work as well for video gaming simply because, for example, Ubisoft isn't going to release a new game every 6 months or every 5 months, 3 months, or even I mean, I guess like they're one of those studios that can release an Assassin's Creed every single year, but they don't. I don't think they can release the amount of content in order to justify a monthly subscription for just one, brand. Now,
But
Do
what
let me
I
ask
think,
you this question, Gabe. Let me
yeah.
ask you this question, Gabe.
Mhm.
Let's say that they do open it up for all the studios. Don't you think that there may be a case to be made that, let's say, for example, Ubisoft releases the next Assassin's Creed, right? And
Hmm.
that's the thing that comes out. And so for that month, you subscribe to the Ubisoft channel. And once you finish with the game, you can go ahead and subscribe to, I don't know. And again, I'm not familiar with what they're doing. I'm just going
Hmm.
to pick the first one that's out there. Maybe they go and they subscribe to whatever next studio that's out there that they have, and
Right.
there's a new game that comes, right, exactly, and then there's a game that comes out on that, and they say, you know what,
Mhm.
I'm going to cancel my Ubisoft subscription and then I'm going to open up my subscription for this channel. You're getting
So
everything for like $6. And again, I
yeah.
don't know the pricing, but you understand what
See,
I'm
but
trying to
here's the
get to,
thing.
right?
Here's the thing. Here's the thing. For someone like you specifically, Walter, and I'm surprised that you're asking this question because you should know better. Okay, for someone like you that, because of responsibilities, you have a family, you have a job that you have to like spend a lot of time on.
No doubt.
You're not going to get to a game, you know, like within a month, let's say, right? So that's where the Game Pass will benefit you, right? Simply because, all right, this month you want to dedicate a little bit of time to, Ghost of Tsushima. Oh well, let's stay in the realm of Xbox. Let's say,
I'm still on Ghost of
Assassin's Creed
Tsushima.
from Ubisoft, right? You
Yeah.
want to put some time into that, and then next month, you want to put a little bit of time into Call of Duty. But you know what? Somewhere along the lines, like maybe 2 weeks into that month, you decide, oh, you know what? I want to play a little bit of, Assassin's Creed before I play this other one. What, you're gonna like just go in, sign on to your membership, then when you're done, cancel it, and then go back? That's I don't think that
But
that's
what
gonna
about
work
the
very well.
but what about the hardcore gamer that has the time to do it? That's a
The
pretty good
if you're a
thing to do.
hardcore gamer, you already have all the consoles anyway.
Okay,
So
but you know what?
I don't think that it's gonna work for them very well. I think that it's something that they're trying, but I don't think that it's gonna work very well if that's the direction that they're gonna keep. Um, I think that Game Pass really is the way to go. Especially it also, the other thing that it does, it also kind of gives an ecosystem for studios to develop, right? Because when you have a membership service like Game Pass, Netflix, Amazon Prime, or whatever, you also have analytics. How many of these members are playing your game, and how often are they signing on and stuff like that? Now these developers have real time analytics that they can get not from a separate third party service, but directly from Microsoft that they're going to be able to, provide so that they can continue building off of the platform, giving themselves the tools that they need in order to like grow it more. And it behooves Microsoft to do that for the developing studios as well as their first party studios. So that's why I think that Microsoft is gonna be the key, to the future of gaming, simply because they're developing this ecosystem that the other game studios are going to have to, jump on, including Amazon, because I don't think Google's going to do anything with Stadia, to be honest
No,
with you. It's been out for a
I don't
while.
think that's
Nobody really cares for it.
exactly.
However, Amazon has their Lumberyard
And
engine,
Amazon can
which
afford to do
is
it.
Amazon. Well, Google can afford to do it too. It's just Google's lazy. Google
Well,
likes to
that's
buy all
true.
these other companies and like, hey, like, okay, make me money. Amazon wants to invest. Amazon invested in the gaming community by
Mhm.
creating an entire division just to create a game engine that they are licensing out, not just for Amazon, but they will be licensing out for, other platforms as well. And then also launching Luna launching Luna and so on and so forth. So I think Amazon Amazon, I think, is competing a little bit more with Steam, in my opinion.
That's
Um,
true.
Yeah.
You
but
do know about Twitch Prime, right? Where you get those free games
yes,
every month.
yes, 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 yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
But again, that's we're talking like there's just honestly, we're basically at the pinnacle of the next evolution of gaming. You
Yeah,
know what I
I
mean?
think so.
I think that what the whole push and move towards streaming is as big as the push from 2D to 3D. And I think that like there hasn't been, maybe actually the last time that there was a really really big push was to essentially to losing my train of thought, but to multiplayer, right? Like we went from 2D to 3D. Now it's from 2D and 3 onto multiplayer.
Mhm.
Now it's multiplayer to streaming,
Or
right?
to
I
your
think that's
point,
the next thing. Now,
Blockbuster to Netflix.
exactly. So,
Yeah.
Jose,
Discless.
what like as
Hey.
far as as far as the whole Netflix, and blockbuster whole thing, what do you
Uh-huh.
think about this whole theory that I have behind it?
Well, yeah, I wanted to add to a couple of points that both of you have made recently about how this is going to affect the industry as a whole. And I think one of you guys, I think Gabe, you made this point, kind of how like it's going to be a draw. Game Pass, the service is almost going to be a draw for third-party gaming studios and not just first-party gaming studios, because to that point, you look at it almost like Steam, right? Or Netflix. Both models are somewhat similar in the regard that because they have this huge wealth of content and because they're so ingrained in distributing content in their respective spaces, Netflix being movies and TV, Steam being video games, right? Because those are two huge houses for distributing all of that, you look at Steam and you have a lot of companies or even small developers that develop games for Steam or remaster games for Steam. I think a good example in that kind of relates to some recent news is that there's some rumors that they're going to remaster Metal Gear Solid for PlayStation 5, the original, right? The PlayStation original. But
That would make me buy a PlayStation 5.
yeah, exactly. That's huge. But also, if you think about it, on Steam, they've already been doing that for a couple of years. There are developers that are distributing it on Steam and like crowdsourcing it on Steam and crowdfunding it on Steam that have been creating Metal Gear Solid remakes for PC for like 5 years now. So those developers are going to, I think, in the same way that they go towards Steam, or you have certain production companies that go towards Netflix, or movie personalities like an Adam Sandler or Jamie Foxx or Charlize Theron that go toward Netflix because of how big they are in the space, again, of distribution in their particular genres. I think Game Pass is primed maybe to do the same thing, and that could be a big game changer as well. But I don't know. What do you guys think about that point, Gabe? Maybe you want to add to that a little bit?
Well, I mean that's more or less in line with how I feel that this is going to be that shift in the industry. There's so many different opportunities, so many different ways to make things happen. I think that another big thing about like streaming as a whole is that it's now going to this is where it's going to start like attracting specific developers, right? Whereas before the console war was played out with like if you're a developer, which is the console that you want to go to, obviously you want to go to the one that has the best install base, also compared to the easiest development cycle,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you have to weigh the development cycle versus installed base, right? Because the development cycle is going to determine how much money you need to develop a game,
Yeah,
and then
really good point.
your
Mm-hmm.
installed base is going to determine how much of a return on that you're going to get. So if you're a smaller company, you want to go to the place that's going to give you the cheapest development cycle, even if they have a small install base. However, with streaming, now you want to go to the place that's going to give you the most support for your development cycle, right? Because you
Mm-hmm.
can go to Microsoft and be like, well, it's going to take me like a year or 2 years to develop for Microsoft, but once we're on that streaming platform, you know what I mean, now our installed base user cycle is not going to be the 18 months. It's going to be as long as the game is continued to be popular. It's going to be showing up the same way that it shows up on Netflix, like, hey, popular, in the US at this time, popular comedies, or rather
Yeah,
popular action games and stuff like
top
that,
10 in
like,
the
hey, just
U.S.
play this right now. You don't have to make the decision of like, oh, I want to pay $10 for this indie developer to check out this game because it looks recommended. No,
Really good point.
it's
Mhm.
now it's now going to be like, because of its popularity, I don't need to make that decision to buy the game anymore. Because how many indie games have we all played? Like the $10, $15 games.
A few, but
Some of
not
these
as
games
many.
are
Yeah.
amazing,
Hmm.
but it takes I think that it takes a lot for anyone to even decide to, like, hey, I'm gonna invest $10. For sure, $10 or two coffees this week, but it's not just the $10, it's the time and energy to play the game and check it out and so on and so forth. If I don't have to pay that extra $10, if I take that decision out of the equation, now I can download it and play it 3 months later. Guess what? That developer just made money. And
Yeah.
now, and that's where I think it's going to be huge, because the developer is going to go to wherever the biggest install base is, period. And for me, it's going to be Game Pass.
To your point, really quickly, like it's definitely true that you're going to check out games that you wouldn't have before, because two examples for me that I got that I games that I played and really enjoyed, one that I'm close to finishing and one that's more of like a strategy game. Stellaris, this game that I'd never heard of, came out on Game Pass some months ago, and it's like kind of a Civilization style game. And I love Civilization style games. I never would have found that if it weren't for Game Pass. And oh geez, a Plague Tale, excuse me, a Plague Tale is this other game. It's very much in the vein of those third person action games like a Last of Us. It's from a smaller French studio. Okay, I'm actually playing the game in French, with French language, because it was originally done in French. It has the lip syncing for the English as well, which is something that I think more developers need to do when they have multiple languages. Looking at you, Ghost of Tsushima. But yeah, those are games that I never would have explored.
Yeah. Yeah.
Indie, not
So
exactly indie games, but smaller games that I never would have
just,
seen otherwise.
smaller games, games
Hmm.
from, that we haven't really heard of,
Hmm.
because they get like completely overshadowed by the marketing and everything, by all these other, bigger titles, right?
Highly
Universal
recommended
Pictures
games.
or Rockstar.
Yeah,
So anyway, in closing, basically, I think we've like really done a deep dive on this one little bit of news. It was basically,
it's huge.
hey, we're buying Zenimax, Bethesda, and all of a sudden it turned the entire gaming world future upside down on its head. And
In a good way, we think.
as you can see, like, huh?
In a good way, we
What was
think.
that?
In a good way,
Oh
I
no,
think. It turned
absolutely
it
in
on
a
its
good
head,
way,
right?
absolutely in a good
Yeah.
way. But it also kind of, like I said, I've had faith in Microsoft for a long time.
Hmm.
The Xbox One didn't necessarily deliver, but I also wasn't mad at the Xbox One. But that being said,
Hmm.
I think that Microsoft is definitely poised to leap ahead, so to speak. I don't think that they're gonna like destroy Sony. I really don't think so. Sony has
Yeah.
an insane installed fan base. I always buy a PlayStation, even though I choose Microsoft generally first over PlayStation.
Hmm.
Um,
Same thing. Hmm.
but uh, but I think that, like, this is just opened the eyes of the possibilities, because obviously Game Pass is a thing and everybody's like excited about Game Pass, but I don't think anybody seriously talked about it until now. It's like, oh wait, this is going to be on Game Pass. Let's talk about it. So we got that, and then
Hmm.
we also just spoke about WandaVision. So a lot of cool stuff happening this week.
Oh my
You
God.
know that
Games
that
just
kind
These
of helps us
video
helps
games.
us. Yeah, it kind of helps us forget about the pandemic just a little bit, I think, right?
But these
a little
video
bit.
games make me broke. It
Yeah.
Well,
almost
could
feels
you?
like
But Jose, I
Netflix and
mean, Walter,
Hulu and
could
stuff,
you
where it's like
imagine?
you have to purchase those two things, because one thing is going to be on one thing and one thing is going to be on the other thing. So now, the downside is that now, with the individual companies gobbling up these studios, if
Mhm.
you want to play Spider-Man, and this was already a thing, but if you want to play a
Yeah.
certain game, now you have to go to get an Xbox, or if you want to play another game, you have to go
Yeah.
get a PlayStation. So that's the one downside, I think.
But it's also
Remember,
it's
you
also
don't have to get an Xbox to get Game Pass.
That's true. That's true. But
well look at it this
the
way.
experience will be better on Xbox, right? On the Xbox Series
Yeah,
X.
for sure, for
I,
sure.
I want to look at it this way, Walt.
So
If you think about it this way, I think it's okay, because this is poised to be much like we've been going through the golden age of television, where there's so much crap to watch that we can't even figure it out most of the time, which is why we have this podcast partially to
Yeah.
help each other figure out what to watch and to help our fans figure out like what to watch with this glutton of media out there. I think we're going to be experiencing the golden age of gaming, a new
Just
golden
gonna
age,
be
something
so
something
broke.
akin
I
to
think
the
it's a new
80s.
golden age. Yeah, I
So
think
Yeah,
it'll be a
broke.
good new golden age.
because I guess the '80s
It's
was
funny
like,
because I feel
right.
like this whole, like, the multiplayer age of gaming was like cool, but it's like a really long fad because I've been yearning for, amazing, world experiences that I'm getting
Same.
now, like towards the end of multiplayer. And it's like that's almost like a foreshadowing of what we're going now.
Man,
I'm going to be able to play all the single player games for $25 a month.
Yeah.
but I'm gonna be so broke. Like I
Anyway,
said,
so
no
with
more
that,
Happy Meals and dollar menu
so with
from
that,
now
so with that, I want to thank you guys for joining us.
Yeah.
We had a lot of fun, as you can see. I think that we had a lot of fun.
I think
We even
so, too.
brought up The Last of Us too, and we did not break out into
stop.
an argument.
Stop.
Yeah.
We didn't. I'm just saying how we didn't argue
proud
about
of
it. How
us.
we didn't mention how much it sucks.
I'm proud of
What?
it. Walt, you're making it worse right now. I'm not making it worse, and Gabe's not making it worse. It's you this
But
time.
anyway,
It's okay.
but anyway, guys, thank you guys for joining us.
Yes.
We catch you guys on the next podcast. Please make sure that you like, share, rate, and subscribe. Tell all your friends and family. Share it with them, even if they don't, want to listen to a podcast. Just share. You never know.
Make
you never
them
know
know.
who's gonna click and hit the link and
Force them
whatnot. Without your support, we cannot keep recording. So, with that being said, I'm gonna try to do the Jose outro.
Ow!
Okay,
Hit it up, baby.
all you denizens of the internet, stay geeky, my friends.
Yeah.